Here we go. It's another fun Tuesday evening with you all. Nothing I'd rather do, actually. And I'm looking forward to the questions that have been sent to us. Quite a few, actually. So let's get started with those. A worker and I got in a huge fight because he will not do what I tell him. He has no respect for his things or other people's things. It's the tilting point for whether or not I continue the relationship. So, it sounds like you're essentially begging this guy it says he, whether you're begging him to change his behavior. I mean, you're fighting with him, in your own words, to get a respect for his things or other people's things. There's no reason to be fighting with a worker to do the right thing. He's an employee. So you don't fight with an employee or beg with an employee to do the right thing. You simply set the standard for his behavior. You tell him what he has to do, how he has to behave in order to work there. Then you tell him how soon he has to meet that standard of behavior. Then you meet with him regularly to see if he's meeting the time schedule for following that standard or a time schedule. And if he can't meet it, you just let him go. There's nothing to fight about. He's being paid to meet your standards. So fighting, it just doesn't even make sense. But it's like you're afraid to let him go if he doesn't meet the standards. So it's really all about your fears. If this person doesn't meet the standards, there's no question. It's just poof. Then you find somebody who is willing to be paid to meet the appropriate standards. End of discussion. So you can love someone unconditionally and then still say, it's obvious that you have chosen, because this is a choice you're giving him. You're saying, you have a choice. You can meet these standards and I will pay you, or you can choose not to meet these standards and then I will not pay you. In fact, not only will I not pay you, but I will let you go. You don't have to meet these standards. You can behave any way you choose to behave, but not here. Not at this place of employment. And then you love them, you care about them very much, but you can't have them working at your place of business where you have to meet the standards and expectations of your customers. End. Goodbye. And you let them go. This reader says, I'm not sure how to handle an issue with my 8-year-old daughter. She has a history of lying and even stealing. This year, she's been a lot better until recently. Suddenly, she seems to lie about everything. It's not only to get herself out of trouble, she lies to get other people into trouble, like telling me that her brother hit her when he didn't. She lies about what she did at school, what homework she has, what she ate for lunch. There's no rhyme or reason. I know that lying stems from feeling empty and trying to get some love to fill the emptiness, but I really don't see how this much lying could be anything but a habit. How should I respond? I haven't been getting angry with her when I've talked to her about why she's lying, but I think since she says she doesn't know why she does it, I might just need a consequence to remind her that lying won't bring happiness. Any suggestions? So, like you said, lying is out of emptiness and fear. So sit with her and calmly explain why people lie. And then tell her, with me, you don't need to lie. So I've done this with lots of people, and I've helped a lot of parents do this with your children. You don't tell her, don't lie, because people lie when they're drowning. What you say to her is, and this is a critical phrase, you don't need to lie. And you explain to her, you say, now think about the times when you have lied to me. And you point out a time when you know she has. And you don't say, okay, now, have you lied? Don't give her a choice, because then she'll just lie to you again. You say, now, think about this time, and you describe the time when you know she's lied, and you say, now here's a time when you lied. Now think, when you're lying, you feel nervous, don't you? You feel nervous that you're going to be caught lying. And you feel separated from people. You don't feel loved and cared for. You don't feel close to people when you're lying. And so you explain to her, you'll simply be happier. That's all. You'll feel more loved and you'll feel happier when you're telling the truth. And you explain further, you say, when you're lying, you're not being you. And, I think you said she's 8. You can, in some ways, you can illustrate this by doing the bag over the head. You can do it with a shopping bag. You can say, when you lie, you're pretending to be something other than you are. You could do this with your own head or with hers. It's probably a little less threatening if you initially do it with yours. You say, when I lie to you, I put a bag over my head and you can't see me. When you lie, you put a bag over your head and I can't see you. And so you feel alone. And then you ask her, when there's a bag over your head, can you feel as close to me? Well, of course you can't. You can't feel seen by me. You can't feel as close to me. And so, of course, you can't feel as loved by me. And so you can't feel happy. And so then you need to not only explain this, but obviously the reason that she's lying is that she's not feeling loved. And so then you need to go out of your way to make sure that she does feel loved by you. And make sure that you're having enough conversations with her where you're looking at her in her eye and seeing to it that she feels close to you. And heaven knows I've made enough of these mistakes in my own children's lives, where she feels like you're seeing her. It's not just about telling her, I won't be mad at you if you lie to me. It's about her understanding that at times when there are no lies involved, that she needs to feel close to you. So she really has to get that you care about her. So she's got to feel that from you, or she's going to continue to lie. So you need to go out of your way to be unconditionally loving to your daughter, but you don't apply consequences just for lying. You just explain that we're less happy when we're lying. If you punish a kid for lying, or you have consequences for lying, then the child's not going to tell you the truth. Now, you may have consequences for lying to others or about others. For example, if you lie about another person and cause an inconvenience to another person, then the consequence may be that the child would have to go then and tell the truth to that other person. So, for example, if she lies and says that her brother did a thing and her brother gets into trouble, then she may then have to go and tell her brother, I lied about you and I got you into trouble. That's all. That's it. There are no beatings about it. We don't hang her by her thumbs, from the ceiling. She just has to go then and tell her brother, I'm the one that got you in trouble. That's all. And you explain to her that other people don't like it when she lies about them. But that's about as complicated as it gets, so that she understands that lying does have its consequences in relationships with other people. Other people really don't dig being lied about, but that it's not offensive to you personally. If you tell her that it is, then she's not going to tell you the truth. Next writer said, I just recently got married and I'm realizing that my husband and I have different views on birth control. This is probably not a good time to be discovering this. I believe there is a time and place for birth control, and he doesn't believe in it at all. We agreed to start a family, but in the last couple of weeks, I've been seeing some things about his personality that concern me, such as his anger. Now, understand, this is for the benefit not just of you, but of everybody else who's listening. This is why, before you get married, there are a lot of issues that need to be thoroughly discussed before you get married. Birth control would be one of these. Kind of like figuring out whether the person you're married is gay or straight. This is one of those really important subjects, because when you go to work this out after you're married, it causes enormous problems. Like, okay, what do you think about birth control? What do you think about sex? What do you think about having a family? What do you think about money? These are subjects you want to work out before you get married. So I'm saying this mostly for everybody else who's listening, because after you get married, well, it's a little late. And yes, I agree that working out something about birth control now is pretty important in light of what you're discovering about his anger, because you really don't want to go ahead and have children and then discover that you have an explosively angry father for your children. So in this issue, you're right. In any couple, either person in a couple, and we've talked about this in a recent video chat, either person in the couple has the right to veto any important change in behavior on the part of the couple. So, if the two of you are going to do anything important, like, spend a large amount of money. In my personal marriage, that would be over $100, literally. If we're going to spend something over $100, then we have to agree on it. And if either of us says, no, I don't think that's a good idea, then we don't spend it until we're in agreement. If the two of us are going to go on a trip together, well, then either one of us has the right to veto that. Why is that the case? Because why would either of you ever have the right to impose on the other one anything that would be painful or inconvenient or harmful to the other? Well, that's crazy. And that's why either person has the right to veto any action that could be harmful to either of you, or to that person, or to the couple. That's hence what I call the veto principle. So this would apply to having children. It may be that one of you wants to have children, okay? But you see, no matter how badly he wants to have children, if you decide that, well, that may not be a good idea, and that may be harmful to my physical health, my emotional health, that may be harmful to the children, if you decide, and it doesn't really matter what the reason is, if you decide, I don't agree with that, that's enough reason to stop it. You both have to be in harmony on any important principle in order for it to go forward. That's why it's called a partnership. So you've got to be in agreement on this one. You continue. I really would like this marriage to work, but I feel it would be best to hold off getting... This drives some people just crazy, by the way, especially men who have been raised by some domineering, unrighteous fathers to believe that men have the right to tell their wives what to do. Well, that kind of comes from, the Stone Age, where, might makes right. Just because they're physically bigger, that gives them right to tell their wives what to do. That's unbelievably Neanderthal. How could a man possibly look his wife in the face and say, "Oh, I'm bigger, and I'm a man, and so I get to tell you what to do"? You're kidding me. On what planet could that possibly fly? So you continue. I really would like this marriage to work, but I feel it would be best to hold off getting pregnant for a couple of months as we work through these challenges. My fear is that he will leave because last week when I brought up the topic of using condoms, he freaked out and threaten to leave the marriage. I would like to go on the pill so that I feel that I have a choice in whether I get pregnant right now. It's always your choice. No woman, it's again unthinkable, no woman should ever feel like she's forced to get pregnant. That's, even the notion is insane. And yet, there are women all over the planet, not a few, but millions, who are in relationships where they are forced to have children against their will. Physically forced, emotionally forced, and you get to discuss how that's going to be prevented. You continue. My question to you is, should I tell him I'm going on the pill or not? I'm afraid to tell him for fear that he might leave and we'll get into another huge argument and he'll verbally attack me like he did last week. So, yes, you have the right to not have children, but whatever you do, discuss it. So, you have the right to not have children, but again, you're in a partnership. So, don't go unilaterally making the decision. Talk to him about it. But then, ultimately, you can't be forced to have a child, and so you get to choose not to. Now, let's say you decided you wanted to have children. He also gets to choose not to. It's not just your choice. So if you decided, well, I'm going to have children, no, you don't get to decide to have them either. He would get to choose not to have them. And every once in a while, actually it's not that uncommon, there are women who decide, well, I'm going to go off birth control and I'm going to have children. Well, what a horrifyingly selfish and deceitful thing for them to do. They don't get to make that decision on their own either. And so this is how you go about doing it is a discussion that the two of you need to have. So if he decides to go ballistic, well, I'm not going to use condoms, fine. Then the two of you need to discuss, so what method does he prefer? Pills, IUDs, whatever. And you need to come up with something that you mutually agree on. Now, he can't, on his own, decide what you're going to put in your body. So it has to be something that you're going to have to agree on. If he, for example, decides, well, you're going to have a hysterectomy, well, he can't decide that for you. So you get the point of what I'm saying. So, you do have to talk to him about it, and the two of you definitely do need to discuss this. This reader says, I moved out back in September of 2007 and have been going through a divorce now for 18 months. It's a bitter, bitter thing. I'm trying to keep full through the process. It's not always easy, as the other side is usually quite extreme in their presentation. We're trying to be fair while being smart and prudent. I was wondering if you had some advice or love you could send me around this issue. I feel like it's a battlefield and one I choose for myself. Yet, how does one, fight for one's rights while staying calm, centered, and fair in the face of huge fear, anger, and victimhood? I would suggest that you read the last chapter of Real Love and Marriage, because it's all about divorce. But a short version is that divorce is, once you've decided that you're not going to be with this person anymore, the actual process of the divorce is mostly business. It's a dividing of assets and things. You're already done with the emotional process. You don't want to be ugly, but now you're not talking about repairing. You're not talking about nurturing and loving. You don't want to do anything unloving. But you're not talking about putting a relationship back together here. You're not talking about how to be unconditionally loving to a partner. You're talking about how to separate from a partner. And so now it's mostly about it's business decisions. And it's huge that you do not expect from your soon-to-be ex-partner things like kindness, respect, fairness, love, resolution, that's usually what people are looking for in a divorce. They want to figure it out. They want to know what went wrong. They want to resolve things. They want a sense of finality. If you're looking for all that, go see your counselor. Go to reallove.com and talk to people in the conference calls. But don't look for it in the divorce. It's very unlikely that you're going to find it. Don't look for a sense of justice, because you're not going to get that in the divorce either. Don't look for justice by getting more of the assets than your partner. No, just get it over with. Don't look for fair. Look for as equitable as possible. Look up the meanings of those two words. You're not going to get completely fair and even. Get what's workable as opposed to fair. This reader says, I started a new job in July, or last July, and I'm working with two others in my immediate work group, Fred and Susie. And Fred hasn't been there too much longer than I, but has way more job experience than I do in our job field. Fred is relentless in getting tasks done, and other people, particularly Susie, think that he's bossy and demanding. Susie has been there for 20 years, but also has had a lot of health problems, including lymphoma, and had to take a leave of absence for a while. She's an attacker and a victim, but disguises it by saying that she's just being truthful. Many people do that. I think she feels justified by her cancer and all she's been through, and I'm the people pleaser. Fred talks to me about Susie, and she talks to me about Fred, and I tend to be agreeable. Despite this constant sparring, the team's performance has actually improved. We've been too busy with focusing on tasks to focus much on the personal problems. But now there's a lull in the work, and so there's more attacking going on. Because I'm eager to learn and want to help, Fred tends to tell me what to do, and I jump up and do it. For the most part, I'm okay with that. But today, Susie came by and chastised me for doing what Fred wants. She thinks that makes her look bad because she has a problem with taking orders from him. She believes that I should tell him no. So I try to work while I listen to them lob insults at each other all day. I'm a coward and don't know how to infuse love into this situation. I really like my job, and I'm learning a lot, and I think we have the potential to have a good team, but I'm afraid that all of that will disintegrate soon if something doesn't change. Thursday, our manager is getting us together so we can talk about how we as a group can communicate better. Do you have any thoughts on what we can do? So you're going to have to decide whether meeting with Susie and Fred individually or together is the best thing. That varies. Sometimes meeting with people separately is better because they can hear it better, or meeting with them together is the best. It's probably going to be better to meet with them all together, because otherwise you're going to get different stories from each of them, and then you're going to end up having to meet with them together anyway. So meet with them both at the same time, and tell them, say, it's my experience that most people are afraid to take risks. They don't say anything because they're afraid that if they do, they might get hurt and people won't like them. And then you tell them, that's me. I'm afraid to say anything because I'm afraid that people won't like me. I'm a people pleaser, and that's my fault. I've been watching something harm our team, and I have not been saying anything, and I apologize for that. We have enormous assets here on our team that I believe our team could be twice as successful as it is, and I've been sitting back and saying nothing. So that's bad on my part, and I want to apologize for that. I want to repent, so to speak, and change that direction. So I bring an asset of being able to bring talents in a team together. I believe that I can make use of that asset right now. I bring political assets. I bring assets of being able to bring our team politically more connected to other people that we deal with. And I bring other assets, and we'll talk about those here shortly. You, Fred, have assets that you bring to our team, that these assets that you possess better than Susie does. You do things you do way better than Susie and way better than I. Susie, you do things better than both of us, and so on. But what I'm seeing is that our team is not doing as well as it could because I see a competition between the two of you as you fight over who's going to be the top dog over whatever. And give them an example. Say, yesterday I watched the two of you insult each other and fight with each other over whatever, over this banana. Describe whatever it was. And here you were fighting over this banana for a period of half an hour when all we had to do was get together as a team and say, why don't we have Fred take care of this banana? Or Susie take care of this banana, this particular task, and it just would have been done. That was a real waste of our team's assets, and that's harming our team. And considering today's, economic atmosphere, we can't afford to be wasting our team assets. Or some other better equipped, more efficient team is going to come along and replace all of us. So I suggest we become more efficient. And that we decide who's best equipped to handle a particular thing and just make the assignment and be done with it. And recognize that for any given task or thing, Fred may choose to do it with a different style than, say, I would or Susie would. Well, okay. And maybe we could, propose little things that would improve on Fred's performance a little bit. Unless it matters really significantly, stylistic differences just aren't that important. We can always come in and say, well, I would do it a little differently. Unless it matters hugely, mostly we need to shut up and support the members of the team and work together for the benefit of the team rather than criticizing and carping. And now if somebody goes to interrupt you while you're talking about this, you say, I called this meeting and there's something that I want to say and I want to finish this before we have comments about this. So this is fairly important to me, and this is actually one of those things that I was talking about. This is an asset that I bring, and I would like to develop this asset and present this to you before we have comments about it. So wait till I'm done, and then you can comment. And you will carve out a niche in the team that I believe the team will see is an asset that will benefit all of you. So I suggest that you try this, because if the two of them keep bickering and carping, you're going to end up with a team that's inefficient, and then everybody loses. People end up losing their jobs, and everybody dies. So you'd be pretty smart to address this and not just let it go. It's not just bickering, it's destruction. Here's somebody who says, I'm currently reading the book Real Love with my boyfriend. He really has anger issues where he takes everything out on me, and I used to freak out, but once I read some of the pages about getting or protecting behaviors, I calmed down. Good for you. And I talked to him calmly, but now he thinks I'm giving him attitude, and he gets even more angry, and I don't know what to do anymore. So when here you are being calm and he gets more angry, it's probably intimidating to you. And I'm sure he's just frightened. He doesn't know what to do, because here he intimidated you before with his anger. Now, with you being calmer, you appear to be less intimidated, and so he doesn't know what to do. He always got a sense of power with his intimidation. Now he's getting less power from it, so he figures, well, if I get less power from my anger, now I have to do more anger to get the same amount of power. That's all he's doing, is ramping up his anger to get the same amount of power. He's confused. He's lost. And so you need to say to him, so what do you want here? What do you want out of our relationship? Because what I want out of our relationship is I want a relationship that's based on love, unconditional love, and you describe to him what real love looks like. I want a relationship based on love and one that leads to happiness. That's what I want. So we can have that, or we can have a relationship based on anger and trading power and intimidation and yelling and all the other stuff that's not unconditional love. Now, I choose real love and happiness. It's really important to know what you choose, because I will only be in a relationship based on love and happiness. So, what do you choose? And you say it just like that. In fact, you could write down what I just said, and you say it to him just that calmly. And if he gets angry after that, your decision, if you're wise, is already made, because you've just chosen a path of love and happiness. And if he gets angry, what he just told you was, I'm leaving you. And so then what you say is, thank you for making the decision obvious. After that, there's no reason to stay with somebody like that, because he's telling you, I would rather have imitation love than real love. I would rather be unhappy than happy. He just made it really easy for you. So you're just describing the choice for him. Makes it simple as can be. The next reader says, I have a daughter, Lisa, and I hadn't had much of a relationship with her since I divorced her father. She says she doesn't trust me, and it seems to go back 25 years to the time of the divorce. Long time ago. Although she's now in her 40s and says she understands why I divorced him. We even had a session with her therapist one time, and all she could talk about was me divorcing her dad, who's an alcoholic, and she seems to have a pretty good relationship. With him. Still, I've tried to communicate with her, and she doesn't get back to me. This is no communication that's happened for years. Now, when her 3 sisters come to town, we all get together and have a good time, and she seems to be able to handle having me around and can even be loving. And this happens every couple of years. But then, after we get together, I don't hear from her. But recently I got email, and I discovered that when I emailed her, she responded the next day. So maybe the computer contact is like the visiting with a lot of people around. It's safe for her. So is my behavior getting and protecting? I keep it safe by email, but I don't make the phone calls. It's probably safe for her too. I want to know what I need to learn from this. It seems like I'm playing it safe because there have been so many rejections from her. So the deal is, you get together in person every couple of years, you have a good time, but then you don't call her, and she doesn't call you, and you're sitting around and you're waiting for her to call you, but you've discovered now that she'll answer your email. So it sounds like the two of you, over the last 25 years, have learned just to avoid each other. You just don't know what to say. And having pretty much no experience with unconditional love, how would you know what to say? Most people have no idea what loving language even looks like. So you wouldn't know what to talk about. And you have a lot of pain over this. You actually are expressing here that you need her to contact you. It pains you that she doesn't. And she feels that. You're disappointed when she doesn't call you. And children don't like that. Children don't like the sensation of being a disappointment to their parents. So the first suggestion I would have is pretty simple, and that is learn that it's your job to love her completely unilaterally. You need to get all the love that you can from other adults and love your daughter in a one-sided relationship. So you love her and you email her. Email her maybe once a week, or alternate and call her once a week, but start calling her. Call her and just say, hey, how are things? Here's what I'm doing. I'm doing this at work. I talked to your other 2 sisters. What are you doing at work? How are your kids if she has kids? And just tell her what you're doing in your life. Just talk about stuff. If she's not home, leave a message and call back a few days later. Now, if she doesn't return your call, don't ever say, gosh, I left a message and you didn't call back. Never do that, because then that places a burden on her to communicate with you. And then that's when we use those disappointed tones of voice. I left a message and you didn't call me back. Oh, that just kills a kid. So forget all those years that you didn't communicate. Start over. And every week just have some kind of communication with her. And just see what it turns into. Don't worry about all that past stuff. Just learn who she is. Find out what she likes. Learn about her friends. Whatever. Figure it out with her. Let's see. My boyfriend, new writer or reader, doesn't like his current career. But then he complains all the time that he doesn't have time to do what's necessary to change his career, like study for the exams and stuff that would make it possible for him to get out of his present job. But I notice that he spends a lot of his time fooling around on the internet doing all sorts of other things. In his defense, a lot of his efforts are for other people, like his parents, because he feels obligated to them. But he also just goofs off, plays around. But whatever he's doing, he just doesn't get around to preparing for the steps necessary for a career change. For example, he has some civil service exams coming up, and he's been putting off studying for them for months, and now it's almost too late. He's been putting off completion of a university correspondence degree for almost 10 years now. He's been studying for this exam, and he puts it off and studies for it and puts it off, and he never gets this exam done. My question is, what should I do? What's the loving thing to do? Do I just say that it's none of my business? Maybe it's not. But if I do nothing, then he'll wait until it's too late. And then he'll feel terrible about himself, as he's done before, and then I have to deal with the consequences of that. He feels worthless, then he hates himself, and he hates his job all the more, and then I have to support him and make him feel better about himself. These are huge questions that you're asking. And rather than deal with the detailed questions, which don't get to the root of things. In other words, how do you deal with just his studying habits? How do you just deal with the way he deals with his parents, which is the way we tend to deal with this? You really have to get to the big overall questions first, which start with you. And really it's always about real love first. We tend to deal with technique-y kind of questions, and we don't get to the important ones. You have to see the overall picture always. So, the overall question for you is, what do you want? Do you want him to be happy? Or do you want to control him? Do you want to be happy in the long run? Or do you want him to just avoid pain in the short term? So, if you really want him to be happy overall in the long term, then the only way for him to be happy in the long term is if he feels loved, and if he's loving, and if he's responsible. And if you really care about him, then you can't just stand by and do nothing, because right now he doesn't feel loved, he's not feeling loving, and he's not behaving in responsible ways. So there are lots of things that you can do. So you can unconditionally support and love him, but that wouldn't involve just standing around. He needs some help here learning what it means to be responsible and loving to people at the same time. See, he thinks that being loving means doing whatever anybody wants. So his parents come along and say, would you do this for me and would you do that for me? So he gets distracted by that, and then he can't study for his exams, and then he feels screwed no matter which way he goes. So you can be loving and supportive and yet teach him what responsible looks like at the same time. So you can sit down with him and you can say, what do you want? And this is where teaching him, really loving him, so loving him involves teaching him. So you can say to him, what do you want? Do you want to be genuinely happy? Or do you just want to avoid other people's disapproval all your life? Because if you just want to avoid disapproval, well, you can do that from minute to minute, but you're going to end up chasing your tail forever. And if you want to be genuinely happy, then you have to be willing to look at pretty much every single element of your life and see how that fits into the overall goal of happiness. And that involves getting out a piece of paper, getting out a pad and looking at every element of your life and seeing how that fits into that overall goal. How is each part contributing to that goal? For example, pleasing his parents. Well, if he does everything that his parents ask him to do, that will help him avoid pain for a moment or two or three, but does it genuinely contribute to his feeling unconditionally loved and unconditionally loving and making him genuinely happy? You're going to have to help him with this, because I don't think he understands this. It really doesn't. He's not being unconditionally loving. He's buying their conditional approval. So, for a period of time in his life, you may actually have to help him say no to them. I've actually, in the case of many adults, written them a prescription on a pad that says you're forbidden to associate with your parents for 3 months or whatever it is. And you may not have to do something quite so extreme with him, but like during the period of study for his examinations, and we'll get to that in a minute, there may be a period of 30 to 60 days where he has to send them a note that says, I can't return any phone calls, I can't answer any emails, I can't anything, because he simply can't tell them no. This is just one of the things that you may have to discuss with him where you have to help him. Job. Does he like his present job? Many people, as they reflect on what really makes them happy, finally conclude that they don't like the field they're in at all and have to completely change the field they're in. On the other hand, when you don't have enough unconditional love in your life, changing the job you're in is probably not a really great idea. People need to get enough unconditional love in their life before they make decisions about changing career fields, because often it turns out that it wasn't the job at all. And when they get enough unconditional love, they discover that they could be happy in a number of career fields. So this is just another thing for you to be looking at with him and asking him, is it really the job, or is it just that he's overall unhappy and he's using the job as an excuse? But does he really want to prepare to, for example, prepare for advancement, civil service testing, and so on? If that's true, then exactly what would a schedule look like for preparing for the testing? Not just, well, I'll study more, but exactly how much testing per day between now and the day of the exam, and in what parts, and you can actually schedule out what the studying would look like. If the test has 10 parts, for example, and there are 30 days between now and the test, well, then he's going to have to do 3 days per part between now and the test, and so on. But he's going to need some help. And clearly this guy's crippled with his indecision. Somebody's going to have to sit down with him and say, do you actually want help? Because if you don't, then what you're deciding is you don't want to succeed in taking the test. So rather than moan and cry about how you don't have time to prepare for the test, just make the decision now. Just go ahead and say it up front. I don't want to take the test. Then you don't have to fuss and moan about all the studying. Just be done with it now. Why do all the fussing about half preparing There's no sense half preparing for a test. Just say, I don't want to do it, and don't prepare at all. But this guy's going to need your help. Then write down as one of the elements of preparing for happiness in his life, his relationship with you. Does he really want to have a loving relationship? If so, what are you really doing about it? Are you, for example, really reading the Real Love and Marriage book? Are you going through the 40 Days book together? Are you... In other words, what I'm saying is, it sounds like all he does is crisis management. And if you're not sitting down with him and planning out a life, you're doing crisis management with him. So, crisis management is exciting, but it's a really crummy way to live. And I would suggest taking a different course, that's all. And planning the whole thing out together. If you're going to build a house, you could throw up a few bricks and then decide, well, let's pile a window on top of a few bricks, and then after the window starts to fall over, you could say, oh, maybe we should have put a few more bricks up, and then after everything starts to fall over, you could go, whoa, a foundation would have been good, and then excavate a foundation. You could build a house that way. Or you could plan the whole thing from the beginning and do it with blueprints. The blueprints way seems to work better. That's what the architects do, and so I'm just suggesting that we do that with our lives. This writer says, my older brother is currently driving my car, and he said he would like to buy it in December. I told him that he has 2 months to start making payments, or I'm going to sell it. Well, the time has passed, and he hasn't started paying. I don't want my brother to be without a car because he drives over an hour to get to work, but I can't keep letting him take advantage of me and my generosity. Help me. So it's not really so much about him taking advantage of you. It's about real love. You want him to be genuinely happy, and you want you to be genuinely happy, which again involves being genuinely loved, genuinely unconditionally loving, and responsible. It's about genuine happiness, not just driving a car. If the idea was just driving a car, then, we would say the object of life was to drive a car, but it isn't. It's about happiness. So, he can't feel loved, he can't be genuinely loving and be responsible while he's driving a car dishonestly and not keeping a promise, and not doing what he said he'd do. And you can't feel unconditionally loving, where you're giving it freely while you're allowing him to drive this car in violation of an agreement that you made. So, he's breaking an agreement. It's time for you to take the car back. You made a contract with this guy. And you told him he had 2 months, and the 2 months is up. So you just tell him, hey, I'm really sorry that it didn't work out. You don't tell him that you're sorry you're taking the car back. You're not. You're telling him you're sorry it didn't work out for him. Because the contract's up. He chose, now get this straight, the contract was he would pay you by the end of the 2 months. So when he didn't pay you, he chose to give the car back. You got to get that straight, because what he's going to do is look at you as you taking the car back. That's wrong. Everybody always looks at the person who carries out the consequence as the bad guy, and that's not the case. By his not paying you, he chose to give the car up. In the same way that if you go to Walmart and you pick up a bag of apples and you go to the checkout, and if the bag of apples costs $4.59 and you have no money, then the clerk will hold her hand out for what? The apples. You chose to give the apples up if you show up at the checkout without the money. You chose. The clerk's not being a bad guy. And if you walk out without the apples, then you also choose to go to jail, because now you're shoplifting. So the same thing with your brother. So take the car back. And you don't apologize for what you're doing. He's the one that made the choice. Here's a note from a 9-year-old. I love these. He says, I went on a walk last Friday when I wasn't supposed to. The following Tuesday, I discovered that I couldn't play with my friends for 3 days. I'm sure that this was probably not a surprise to you. You were probably told that was going to happen. I was very sad. And I also threw a big tantrum. So, what did you learn from this? I'm sure that your mother told you in the first place, don't go for the walk. But you chose to go for the walk anyway. And she probably told you that if you go for the walk, that there would be a consequence for that. And you chose to go for the walk anyway, and you thought, well, if I go for the walk, nothing will happen. But it did. And so, what did you learn? That when you do what you're not supposed to do, unpleasant things happen. There are unpleasant consequences that occur as a result of doing what you're not supposed to do. And so the idea is that the next time you go to do something you're not supposed to do, you'll remember, when I go to do something I'm not supposed to do, bad things happen. And you'll decide, I don't want to do the wrong thing. Because wrong things lead to bad things, lead to unpleasant consequences. Then remember your tantrum. Did the tantrum make you happy? Well, of course not. Nobody's happy when they're screaming and fussing and kicking and crying. Nobody's happy. So the bottom line is it's much easier to simply do the right thing. So when Mom says, don't go on a walk when you're not supposed to, don't go on a walk. Do what you're told. And then you don't get restricted from playing with your friends. You don't have to have tantrums. Life is much easier when you do the right thing. And the same is true. It's not just with 9-year-old kids. The same is true with me. They tell me, don't go faster than the speed limit. And if I obey the speed limit, driving is very easy. Oh, it's just very simple. But I have learned in my life that if I decide, because there have been many times in my life that I've decided, no, I'm going to ignore the speed limit. And so what I've done is I've gone much faster than the speed limit. And so for example, on one occasion, I decided that I would go faster than the speed limit around a curve. And so I went much faster, and I lost control of my car and skidded around a curve and slammed into a mountain and completely destroyed my car. And as a result of that, I got to spend, part of the day in the hospital. I completely lost my car. I got fined by the police. My insurance rates went up. I got to spend days getting my car fixed, so it cost me days and days of work. I got fined. I got points on my license, my insurance rate. It cost me a lot. Nobody yelled at me, but it cost me a lot of time and trouble and inconvenience and fines and police and all of that because I didn't do what I was told. In this case, not by my mommy, but by the law. So everybody pays when they don't do what they're told to do, not just 9-year-olds. It's better to do what's right, always. So it's been utterly delightful being with you on Tuesday, as usual. And we look forward to seeing you a week from today. And in the meantime, no matter what the individual advice is about acting on a particular issue, the underlying core thought is that we always have to be more unconditionally loving. So remember, until next Tuesday, that it's always about Real love. We'll see you then.